Why does silence terrify us more than screaming? Steel crashed against concrete. 300 heads turned in unison. Scrambled eggs scattered like shrapnel across polished floors. Coffee pooled in dark circles, spreading slowly, deliberately, like spilled blood on a battlefield nobody remembered. She dropped to her knees. Not stumbled, not fell, dropped. There's a difference. Raven Carter's small hands moved with purpose, gathering soggy toast and ruined breakfast items as if each piece mattered, as if precision in small things could somehow erase the stares burning into her back. Black hair fell forward, creating a curtain between her face and 300 pairs of eyes watching from 20 different nations. Elite operators, special forces, the best their countries had to offer. All of them watching a cafeteria worker pick up breakfast debris like it was the most important mission of her life. Look at this. The voice cut through the silence like a blade through skin. Lieutenant Mason Drake stepped away from his table, boots heavy on the ground. 6'2" of SEAL confidence. 220 pounds of muscle wrapped in tactical gear, sleeve tattoos catching fluorescent light as he gestured toward the kneeling woman. Two figures followed him. Captain Charlotte Hayes from British SAS, red hair pulled back in a perfect bun, intelligence in her eyes and ice in her smile. Lieutenant Ethan Cole, Force Recon, with the kind of jaw that belonged on recruiting posters and the kind of arrogance that came from never losing. 3 weeks and she still can't carry a tray. Raven didn't look up. She continued collecting debris with methodical precision, fingers moving fast, too fast, like she was diffusing an explosive device rather than cleaning spilled food. The pattern was efficient, almost tactical. Secure the perimeter, work from outside to center, eliminate contamination, confirm clearance. Nobody noticed the pattern. They just saw a clumsy woman on her knees. "You deaf, sweetheart." Mason planted himself directly in her path as she tried to stand. The tray wobbled in her grip. 6'2" versus 5'4". Elite operator with 12 years of experience versus a cafeteria worker in her 30s. The math was simple. Everyone could see it. Raven stepped left. Mason mirrored her movement. She shifted right. He blocked that angle too. 3 times this dance repeated. She never spoke, just stood there clutching the empty tray against her chest like a shield, eyes fixed on the floor tiles as if they held answers to questions nobody was asking. Maybe civilians shouldn't work on military bases. Charlotte's British accent sliced through the tension with surgical precision. Her arms crossed, fingers tapping against pressed uniform sleeves. Intelligence officer, always analyzing, always finding weaknesses, especially weak ones. Ethan laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. Bet she's never even held a rifle. Around the mess hall, conversations had stopped completely. Some people watched openly. Others pretended not to notice while tracking every movement from peripheral vision. A few pulled out phones, recording angles suddenly very interesting. Private Lily Morgan adjusted her position near the coffee station, camera app already active. What they didn't see were the small details. The way Raven's shoulders, despite her lowered head, weren't hunched into defeat. They were square, level, tense with controlled precision. The way her weight distributed evenly across both feet wasn't the stance of someone cowering. It was balanced, grounded, ready. The way she held that tray, hands positioned at exact angles for maximum structural support, wasn't self-taught. It was drilled, practiced until muscle memory made it automatic. Nobody saw these things, not yet. The morning sun through the mess hall windows caught the edge of her collar. For just a moment, a shadow was visible beneath the fabric on her right shoulder. Dark lines, possibly ink, but the angle shifted and it vanished, hidden again beneath carefully chosen clothing. Mason stepped closer, invading personal space with casual dominance. "You going to say something or just stand there looking pathetic?" Raven's voice came out quiet, almost inaudible. "Excuse me, sir, I need to get cleaning supplies." She tried to step around him. He shifted again, blocking her path with his body mass. His buddies chuckled behind him. Charlotte's smile was cold and sharp. Ethan shook his head like he was watching something disappointing. But Sergeant First Class Logan Pierce saw something different from 3 tables away. Logan was 42, 23 years in the Army, 3 combat deployments, enough time and grade to recognize things younger soldiers missed. He saw the micro-adjustment in Raven's stance when Mason got too close, saw the way her left foot angled slightly back, creating a stable base, saw her center of gravity lower by maybe an inch. Defensive posture, not fear training. Logan said nothing, just watched and wondered. Because that moment in the mess hall, just the beginning. See, there's a reason Raven never fights back, a reason she keeps her head down, and it has nothing to do with fear. Colonel Henry Walsh observed from the elevated officers' dining section, coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. The training commander for this NATO facility had 30 years of service, a chest full of medals, and 0 patience for drama in his mess hall. But he also had 0 patience for civilians who couldn't handle the pressure of military environments. His expression made his opinion clear. If you can't take it, don't work here. Mason finally stepped aside, giving Raven just enough room to pass. She moved quickly toward the supply closet, head still down, tray clutched tight. The crowd slowly returned to their meals, conversations resuming with that peculiar energy that follows unexpected entertainment. Pathetic, Charlotte murmured to Mason as they returned to their table. How did she even get hired? Diversity quota, probably, Ethan replied, loading his fork with eggs. Base needs to show they employ locals or something. Nobody mentioned it again. Just another morning incident, meaningless. Except it wasn't. In the supply closet, Raven set the tray down with absolute precision. Not dropped, not tossed, placed with deliberate care at a 90-degree angle to the shelf edge, handle aligned with the corner. She retrieved cleaning supplies from their designated locations without hesitation, without searching, without the fumbling of someone unfamiliar with inventory. Her hands were steady now, no trembling, no fear. She turned toward the door, supplies in hand, and for just a moment her reflection caught in the metal cabinet's surface. The woman who looked back wasn't scared, wasn't weak. She looked tired. That's different. By the time Raven returned to the mess hall, the spill area had been cordoned off with a small warning sign. She cleaned methodically, precisely, using efficient motions that wasted 0 energy. The pattern was specific. The same pattern used for cleaning up after IED strikes. Nobody noticed. They were all eating breakfast. The rest of the morning passed without incident. Raven worked the serving line during lunch rush, distributing meals with quiet efficiency. She didn't make eye contact, didn't engage in conversation beyond necessary acknowledgments. Soldiers moved through with trays, most ignoring her completely, some offering polite thanks. A few of Mason's friends making small comments just loud enough to be heard. Careful with that ladle, wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. Think she can count portions, or is that too complicated? Raven's expression never changed, neutral, calm, absent. But Corporal Connor Reed noticed something. The 24-year-old Army medic had been deployed twice, seen enough human behavior to recognize patterns. When Raven handed him his meal tray, he saw her hands. The calluses were wrong. Not the soft, rounded buildup from repetitive kitchen work. These were hard, specific formations, knuckles, palm edges, the kind that came from striking surfaces repeatedly. Combat sports, maybe, but the distribution was too precise. Connor said nothing, but he filed it away in the part of his brain that collected questions without answers. That afternoon, the NATO facility's command staff gathered for a classified briefing. Colonel Walsh presided, flanked by representatives from 8 different nations. The topic was urgent: Intelligence indicated a high-value target in the region. Tier 1 operator, codename unknown, last known operation classified, current status uncertain. We believe this individual may be working in civilian capacity, the intelligence officer explained, displaying grainy surveillance photos on the screen. Trying to maintain low profile after traumatic combat experience. Standard deep cover protocol for burned assets. Do we have visual confirmation? Walsh asked. Negative, sir. Subject has avoided all photographic documentation for the past 5 years. We're working from outdated imagery and dental records. In the mess hall below, Raven wiped down tables with the same methodical precision she'd used all day. Around her, soldiers came and went, loud and confident, and completely unaware that the woman they'd mocked that morning had once been something none of them could imagine. That evening, she walked to her small apartment 3 blocks from base. Studio, minimal furniture, no photographs on the walls, no personal items visible except a single potted plant on the windowsill that somehow stayed alive despite her frequent absences. She showered, changed into civilian clothes, made tea. Then she sat in the dark and stared at nothing, the way she did every night, replaying missions that would never quite fade, hearing voices that would never quite go silent, carrying weight that would never quite lift. Her phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Still watching over us, Angel. She stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Because some questions don't deserve answers, some names should stay buried, some angels should stay fallen. Have you ever noticed how the quietest people in the room are often the ones who have seen the loudest horrors? Morning came the way it always did, indifferent, mechanical. The alarm buzzed at 0500. Raven silenced it before the second beep, muscle memory from years of waking before dawn for missions that started in darkness and sometimes ended the same way. She dressed in the same style she wore every day. Plain clothes, muted colors, nothing that drew attention. The blue t-shirt was soft from countless washings, comfortable, anonymous. She pulled it on carefully, making sure the collar sat properly, covering what needed to stay covered. In the mirror, she looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a woman in her mid-30s, tired eyes, no makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, someone you'd pass on the street and forget within seconds. Perfect. She arrived at the NATO facility at 0545. Early, always early. The mess hall was still mostly empty, just a handful of night shift personnel finishing meals before heading to barracks. She went through the morning routine, prep stations, check inventory, ensure equipment was positioned correctly. At 0600, the first rush began. Soldiers filtered in, filling tables with the particular energy of military morning. Loud conversations, crude jokes, the comfortable camaraderie of people who trusted each other with their lives but wouldn't trust each other with their phones. Raven worked the serving line. Eggs, bacon, toast. The rhythm was simple, scoop, place. Next. Her movements were efficient, economical, the same way she'd moved in operational environments where wasted motion meant wasted time and wasted time meant wasted lives. Morning, ma'am. A young private, maybe 19, offering a polite smile as she loaded his tray. Morning, her voice was soft, forgettable. He moved on. She served the next soldier and the next. Faces blurred together. Ranks didn't matter here. Everyone ate the same food, stood in the same line, received the same portions. Democracy in breakfast form. Then Mason Drake appeared. He didn't just walk through the line. He made an entrance. Loud greeting to his buddies. Backslap to a fellow SEAL. That particular swagger that came from knowing you were elite and making sure everyone else knew it too. When he reached Raven's station, he paused. Well, still here, I see. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Thought maybe you'd quit after yesterday's performance. Raven kept her expression neutral. Eggs or oatmeal, sir? Oh, she speaks. He glanced back at Charlotte and Ethan, who'd followed him through the line. Did you hear that? Actual words. Charlotte leaned in slightly, studying Raven the way scientists study specimens under glass. Fascinating. I was beginning to think she was mute. Maybe she's just smart enough to know when she's outmatched, Ethan added, accepting his tray with a smirk. Raven served Mason his eggs, 2 scoops, standard portion. Her hands didn't shake, her expression didn't change. She might as well have been serving breakfast to a wall. You know what I think, Mason continued, not moving from the line despite the queue building behind him. I think civilians like you don't belong in places like this. Too soft, too weak, wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real situation. Behind him, soldiers were getting impatient. A few exchanged glances. Most just waited, accustomed to hierarchy and the social dynamics that came with it. Raven met his eyes for just a moment, the briefest flicker of contact before she looked away. Is there anything else I can get you, sir? Something about that look made Mason pause, just for a second, just long enough to feel like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Then it was gone, and she was back to being nobody. He moved on, rejoining his table with Charlotte and Ethan. She looked at you, Charlotte observed, cutting her eggs with precise movements. That's the first time I've seen her make eye contact with anyone. Probably trying to remember my face for when she files a harassment complaint, Mason replied, but there was something uncertain in his voice. Logan Pierce watched this exchange from his usual table. The older sergeant was a creature of habit. Same seat every morning. Same black coffee. Same observation of the people around him, reading body language and microexpressions the way younger soldiers read tactical manuals. There was something wrong about Raven Carter. Not wrong like suspicious. Wrong like inconsistent, like an equation that didn't balance. Her movements were too precise, her spatial awareness too acute. The way she'd positioned herself during yesterday's confrontation, the way she'd maintained control despite being outnumbered and outmatched, the way she'd cleaned that spill with tactical efficiency. None of it matched the profile of a simple cafeteria worker. Logan made a mental note to do some digging, quietly, carefully, because sometimes the most dangerous things were the ones hiding in plain sight. The morning progressed. Breakfast service ended. Raven transitioned to cleaning duties, wiping down serving stations and restocking supplies. Around her, the mess hall slowly emptied as soldiers headed to training exercises, briefings, administrative duties. By 0800, she was alone except for the other kitchen staff. They worked in comfortable silence, each person focused on their tasks. Nobody bothered her. Nobody asked questions. She was furniture, functional, forgettable. Exactly what she needed to be. At 0900, Colonel Walsh conducted his daily inspection. He moved through the facility with the rigid efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in service, noting discrepancies with a sharp eye and sharper memory. He paused at the serving line, examining the cleanliness of the stations. Everything was spotless, regulation perfect. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of acceptable standards, then moved to the next area. He didn't look at Raven, didn't acknowledge her presence. She was civilian staff, beneath notice unless something went wrong. Which was exactly what she'd counted on when she took this job 5 years ago. That afternoon brought the unexpected. A convoy arrived at the facility. Black vehicles with tinted windows, security detail. The kind of arrival that meant high-level personnel and classified agendas. Word spread through the base like wildfire. Someone important was here. Someone with enough clearance to make colonels nervous and generals pay attention. Raven heard the whispers in the kitchen, saw the increased security presence through the mess hall windows, noted the way senior officers moved with heightened awareness, the way communications increased, the way the entire facility shifted into a higher state of readiness. She kept working, kept her head down, kept being invisible. But inside, in the part of herself she kept locked away, something stirred, a familiar alertness, the kind that came from years of operating in environments where threats could materialize from nowhere and survival meant seeing them before they saw you. At 1500 hours she finished her shift, clocked out, walked toward the exit. That's when she saw him. Admiral Richard Fletcher, 58 years old, Navy SEAL legend, 3 decades of service, most of it classified. He was walking across the compound with Colonel Walsh, deep in conversation, surrounded by security personnel. Raven's heart stopped. She changed direction immediately, turned left instead of straight, headed toward a different exit, kept her pace steady, unhurried, just another civilian worker heading home. But Fletcher had already seen her. His eyes tracked her movement across the compound. He didn't stop walking, didn't break conversation with Walsh, but something shifted in his expression. Recognition, surprise, and something else. Concern. Raven made it to the gate, showed her ID, exited the facility, walked 3 blocks to her apartment with the strange feeling of being watched, even though she checked twice and saw no one following. Inside her apartment, she locked the door, drew the curtains, sat in darkness and tried to control her breathing. Fletcher wasn't supposed to be here. This facility was training operations, multinational cooperation, standard NATO protocols. Not the kind of place that required an admiral of his caliber and clearance. Unless something was happening, something big. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again, different from yesterday. "We need to talk, tonight. The coffee shop 2 blocks east of your apartment, 2000 hours. Come alone, this isn't optional, RF." Raven stared at the message until the screen went dark. Richard Fletcher, her former commanding officer, the man who'd recruited her, trained her, deployed her on missions that didn't officially exist, the man who'd promised her that when she left, she'd never be pulled back. He'd lied. Or circumstances had changed. She looked at the clock. 1600 hours. 4 hours until the meeting. 4 hours to decide if she was going to show up or disappear into the kind of deep cover that even Fletcher couldn't penetrate. Outside her window, the world moved at its normal pace. Cars passed, people walked dogs, children played in a nearby park. Normal life, simple life. The kind of life she'd fought to build after everything she'd lost. The kind of life that was about to be threatened. She made coffee, strong, black, the way she'd drunk it in operational theaters when sleep wasn't an option and focus was survival. Then she sat at her small kitchen table and thought about angels, about falling, about whether redemption was something you earned or something that was given, about whether some debts could ever really be paid. The sun set slowly, painting her apartment in shades of orange and red, fire colors, war colors, the colors of burning buildings and muzzle flashes and blood on sand. At 1945, she changed into darker clothes, jeans, black jacket, boots with good tread. She braided her hair tight against her skull. Then she left her apartment and walked into the night, toward a conversation she didn't want to have with a man she'd hoped never to see again. Because some ghosts don't stay buried, some missions don't stay finished, some angels don't get to stay fallen. They get called back. What do you say to someone who knows exactly what you've done when you've spent 5 years trying to forget? The coffee shop was small, local, the kind of place where students studied and freelancers pretended to work while actually browsing social media. Warm lighting, acoustic music playing softly, the smell of espresso and fresh pastries. Normal civilian, safe. Except nothing was safe when Admiral Richard Fletcher was involved. He sat in the back corner, strategic position, back to the wall, clear sightlines to all entrances. Even in civilian clothes, khaki pants, and a dark polo, he couldn't hide what he was: predator, leader, The kind of man who'd sent people into hell and sometimes didn't bring them all back. Raven approached the table at exactly 2000 hours. Not early, not late. Punctuality was a habit she couldn't break, even when she wanted to. Fletcher stood as she arrived. Old-fashioned courtesy from a man who'd killed more people than most soldiers would ever meet. Raven. Sir. It's Richard now, I'm off duty. You're never off duty. He smiled, sad, tired. Neither are you apparently. They sat, a waitress approached. Fletcher ordered coffee, black. Raven ordered tea, green. Neither of them touched the menus. For a long moment they just looked at each other. 5 years compressed into silence. All the missions, all the losses, all the things neither of them could talk about even if they wanted to. You look well, Fletcher said finally. You're a terrible liar. Still direct, that hasn't changed. Some things don't change, others do. She wrapped her hands around her teacup, not for warmth but for something to hold. Why are you here, Richard? You promised me I was done, that I'd paid my dues, that I could have a normal life. I kept that promise as long as I could. 5 years, that's how long as you could lasted. Fletcher leaned back in his chair, and for the first time she saw how much older he looked. More lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair. The weight of command aged people in ways civilians never understood. Something's happened, he said quietly. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about Operation Vanguard Night. The name hit her like a punch to the sternum. Vanguard Night. The mission that had killed her entire team. The mission that had broken her. The mission that had turned her from an elite operator into a woman who served eggs to people who didn't know her name. I don't want to hear this. I know, but you need to. No, I needed closure 5 years ago. I needed answers when it mattered, when my team was dying and I was the only one who walked out. Her voice stayed level, controlled, but something sharp edged into it. Where were you then? Doing everything I could to find out what went wrong. Did you? Some of it, not all. That's why I'm here. The waitress returned with their drinks, set them down carefully, asked if they needed anything else. Fletcher smiled politely and said no. The waitress left, sensing the tension radiating from the table like heat from asphalt. Raven took a sip of tea. Too hot, she drank it anyway. Tell me. Fletcher pulled out a tablet, activated the screen, pulled up a file marked with the highest classification levels. He slid it across the table. The mole we caught last year. Captain James Morrison, Army Intelligence. He wasn't working alone. I know, you told me that in your voicemail. What I didn't tell you was how deep the network goes. We've identified connections to foreign intelligence services, organized crime, rogue military contractors, a web of corruption that spans multiple countries and agencies. Raven scrolled through the file. Names, faces, organizations, a network far more extensive than she'd imagined. And this relates to my team how? Your team stumbled onto something during a previous mission, 3 months before Vanguard Night. Do you remember the weapons cache you found near Kandahar? She remembered, small arms, ammunition, nothing unusual for the region. We logged it, destroyed it, standard protocol. Except it wasn't standard. Those weapons were part of a smuggling operation run by American contractors selling to insurgent groups. Your team found evidence that could have exposed the entire network, so they made sure your team didn't survive long enough to ask questions. The words hung in the air like smoke. Raven set down her teacup, carefully, precisely, because if she moved too quickly, something inside her might break and she'd worked too hard to keep herself together. You're telling me my team was murdered, not killed in combat, murdered. Yes. By Americans. And their associates. It was a coordinated effort. The ambush was planned. The intelligence was manipulated. You were sent into a kill box designed to eliminate witnesses. I was a witness. I survived. You were supposed to die. They didn't expect Death Angel to be quite so hard to kill. The code name, she hadn't heard it in 5 years. Hadn't wanted to. It belonged to someone else. Someone she'd tried to bury. Don't call me that. It's who you are. It's who I was. Fletcher leaned forward. The people responsible for your team's deaths are still operating, still profiting, still endangering soldiers, and we have a chance to stop them, but we need someone who understands their tactics, someone who can analyze their patterns, someone who survived them once. You need an analyst, hire one. I need you. I'm a cafeteria worker. Your Death Angel, Tier 1 operator, the best I've ever seen, and you owe your team the truth about what happened to them. That was the hook, the one thing he knew would cut through all her defenses. Her team. Rodriguez, Kim, Hernandez, Jackson, Martinez, Owens, Chen, Davis. 8 names, 8 faces, 8 voices that still spoke to her in dreams. This isn't fair, she said quietly. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair, but it's necessary. She looked at the file again, studied the faces of people who'd profited from her team's deaths, people who'd sent young soldiers into danger for money, who'd traded lives for profit margins. What exactly are you asking me to do? Intelligence analysis, pattern recognition, help us identify targets and operational vulnerabilities, remote work, no field work, no active operations. You can do it from your apartment. And if I say no? Fletcher's expression hardened. Then these people continue operating, continue profiting, continue putting soldiers at risk, and your team's deaths remain unavenged. Revenge isn't justice. No, but stopping them is both. Raven sat back in her chair, looked around the coffee shop at normal people living normal lives, students laughing over textbooks, a couple holding hands, an old man reading a newspaper. People who didn't know that somewhere in the world, other people were making decisions that would get soldiers killed for profit. People who didn't carry the weight of 8 deaths on their shoulders every single day. She looked back at Fletcher. If I do this, I have conditions. Name them. No field work. I don't go operational. I don't pick up a weapon. I analyze, that's all. Agreed. No one at the NATO facility knows. I maintain my cover. I keep my job. Agreed. And when this is over, when we've identified everyone involved, you let me go. Really let me go. No more missions. No more calls. No more files showing up at midnight. Fletcher hesitated. That told her everything. I can't promise that, he said finally. Because once you're back in, even just analytically, you're part of the system again, and the system doesn't let people go easily. Then we have a problem. Raven, please, this is bigger than your need for peace. Soldiers are dying. Your team deserves justice. She stood up, finished her tea in one long swallow, set the cup down. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. How long? 24 hours, then I decide. Fletcher nodded, respected that. Fair enough, but Raven, those people watching your apartment, the protective surveillance, that's not going away. You're a target now. The network knows you survived. They know you're a loose end. Let them come. Something flickered in Fletcher's eyes. Recognition. The old Raven, the operator, Death Angel. Don't do anything reckless. I'm not the one who showed up at a NATO facility and blew my cover. Your cover was already blown. We intercepted communications 3 days ago. Foreign intelligence services identified you. They're deciding whether you're a threat. That stopped her cold. You waited 3 days to tell me. I needed to assess the situation, put protective measures in place, make sure you were safe before I approached you. How considerate. Raven. 24 hours, Richard, that's what you get. She turned and walked out of the coffee shop into the night. Behind her, Fletcher sat alone with his coffee and his classified files and the weight of sending people into danger. Outside, the air was cold, clear, stars visible despite the light pollution. Raven walked 3 blocks before she noticed the surveillance. Black sedan, tinted windows, following at a professional distance. She stopped, turned, walked directly toward it. The driver's window lowered 2 inches. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Negative, ma'am. Just ensuring your safety." "Whose authority?" "Can't disclose that." "Admiral Fletcher." Pause. "Can't disclose that, ma'am." She studied what little she could see of the driver. Young, professional, military bearing even in civilian clothes. "How long have you been watching me?" 72 hours. 3 days. Same timeline as the intercepted communications. "Am I in danger?" Another pause. "Potentially, but you're covered. We're here to ensure no threats materialize." The window closed. End of conversation. Raven walked back to her apartment, feeling eyes on her the entire way. Inside, she locked the door, drew all the curtains, sat in darkness. On her shelf was an old box. She'd hidden it 8 years ago. Inside were the physical remnants of a life she'd tried to leave behind. She pulled it out now. Opened it. Photos of her team, unit patches, challenge coins, Rodriguez smiling at the camera, Kim making a peace sign, Hernandez caught mid-laugh at someone's terrible joke. All of them young, all of them committed, all of them dead. "I miss you," she whispered to their faces, "every single day, but I can't keep fighting your battles forever." Except maybe she could. Maybe that's what she owed them. She put the box away, made more tea, tried to sleep. Failed. At 0300 she gave up, pulled out her laptop, opened an encrypted email account she hadn't accessed in years. The file Fletcher had mentioned was there, waiting. She stared at it for 10 minutes. Then opened it. And started reading about the people who'd killed her team. How many times can you watch someone die before you stop feeling it? The answer she'd learned was simple. You don't. You just get better at hiding it. Raven worked through the night. The file Fletcher had sent was extensive, detailed, the kind of intelligence that took years to compile and came at costs she didn't want to think about. Names, faces, operations, financial transactions, communications intercepts, a web of corruption that stretched across 3 continents and involved people she'd once trusted. Captain James Morrison, the mole they'd caught, was just one node in a much larger network. He'd been selling intelligence to foreign services, yes, but he'd also been facilitating weapons smuggling, providing operational security for criminal organizations, and actively working to eliminate witnesses. Her team had been witnesses. They'd found that weapons cached near Kandahar, logged the serial numbers, taken photographs, standard procedure. What they hadn't known was that those weapons were part of a pipeline supplying insurgent groups with American military hardware, sold by American contractors for massive profits. The cache should have been destroyed and forgotten. Instead, someone in the chain of command saw the report and made a decision. Eliminate the problem. 3 months later, Operation Vanguard Night was authorized. High-value target. Immediate action required. Intelligence indicated a narrow window. Her team was the best available asset. They'd walked into a kill box. 8 soldiers against an ambush force that knew exactly where they'd be and exactly when they'd arrive. Superior numbers, superior positioning, coordinated fire from multiple angles. Her team never had a chance. Except Raven had survived. Against orders, against probability, against every tactical calculation that said she should have died with the others. Death Angel had lived up to her name. She'd killed 17 hostiles that night. 17 confirmed, possibly more in the darkness and chaos. She'd fought through the kill box, extracted herself through terrain that should have been impassable, made it to the extraction point running on adrenaline and fury and the voices of her dying teammates screaming through her radio. The official report called it an intelligence failure, bad luck, fog of war. The truth was murder. Raven closed her laptop at 0600, made coffee, showered, dressed in her usual plain clothes, blue t-shirt, dark pants. She had work in 2 hours, had to serve breakfast to soldiers who didn't know her name, had to maintain the cover that apparently wasn't a cover anymore. But first, she had a decision to make. Help Fletcher or walk away. Justice or peace. Her team or herself. She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, saw the tired woman staring back, saw the death angel hidden underneath. What do I owe you? She asked her reflection. How much more do I have to give? Her reflection didn't answer. At 0800, she arrived at the NATO facility, showed her ID at the gate. The guard waved her through without really looking, just another civilian worker. Inside the mess hall, she went through her routine, prep stations, check inventory, set up the serving line. The morning rush began. Soldiers filtered in, loud conversations, crude jokes. Mason Drake entered with his usual swagger, Charlotte and Ethan flanking him like wingmen on a combat mission. When Mason reached her station, he paused. "Still here," he observed. "Thought you might have quit after I heard some admiral was asking questions about base personnel yesterday." Raven's heart skipped a beat, but her expression didn't change. "Eggs or oatmeal, sir?" "See, that's what I don't get about you." He leaned against the counter. "Most people, when they get hassled, they react, get angry, file complaints, something, but you just take it like you don't even care. Is there anything else I can get you? Why are you really here? A woman like you working in a mess hall doesn't make sense." Behind him, the line was building, soldiers getting impatient. Charlotte stepped forward. "Mason, let it go. She's not worth the effort." But Mason wasn't letting it go. Something had shifted in his perception. Maybe it was seeing Fletcher on base. Maybe it was the way Raven held herself, that contradiction between apparent submission and absolute control. "You prior military?" he asked suddenly. "No, sir." "You sure? Because you move like someone with training." Raven met his eyes. "I'm sure, sir. Now please, there are people waiting." He studied her for another moment, then moved on, but the look he gave her was different now. Suspicious, curious, dangerous. Logan Pierce watched this exchange from his table. The older sergeant had done his research last night, called in some favors, made some discreet inquiries. Raven Carter, hired 5 years ago, perfect employment record, no complaints, no incidents, background check had come back clean. Too clean. Her resume showed previous work at a diner in Arizona. Before that, a restaurant in Nevada. Before that, nothing. Like she'd materialized out of nowhere 8 years ago with a perfectly constructed civilian identity. Logan had seen enough false identities during his career to recognize the patterns. Raven Carter probably wasn't her real name. After breakfast service ended, Raven took her break outside. She needed air, needed space, needed to think. The surveillance team was still there, different car, same purpose. Her phone buzzed. "Fletcher, have you decided?" She should have been surprised he was calling during her shift. She wasn't. Fletcher didn't respect boundaries. That's what made him effective. "I'll do it," she said quietly, "but not for you, for them. That's all I need. I'll send you access credentials for the secure network. Start reviewing the files. Look for patterns, operational vulnerabilities, anything that can help us build a case against these people. And the surveillance stays in place until we're certain you're not a target. I've been a target for 5 years. I'm still here. Because you're Death Angel, but even angels can fall. I already fell 5 years ago. This is just the landing." She hung up before he could respond. That evening she received the access credentials, logged into a system she'd hoped never to access again, started reviewing files, operations, communications, financial transactions. The network was sophisticated, professional, they'd covered their tracks well. But not perfectly. Nobody covers their tracks perfectly. There are always breadcrumbs, always patterns. You just have to know where to look. Raven knew where to look. She'd spent years hunting people who were very good at hiding, had developed instincts for finding the invisible, connecting dots that didn't seem connected. By midnight, she'd identified 3 potential vulnerabilities in their operational security. By 0200, she'd found a pattern in their financial transactions. By 0400, she'd outlined a preliminary analysis. She sent it to Fletcher with a note. "This is what I see. 3 high-value targets, 2 network nodes, 1 critical vulnerability, but remember, I'm not coming back. I'm just helping." His response came 5 minutes later. "Understood. This is exactly what we need. Good work, Angel." She closed the laptop, stared at her hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like anger and grief and purpose all mixed together. She'd spent 5 years trying to leave this life behind. 5 years building a quiet existence where the loudest sound was dishes clattering, and the biggest decision was whether to serve eggs or oatmeal. But Fletcher was right about one thing. She'd never really left, she'd just been waiting. Waiting for a reason to come back. Waiting for justice. Waiting to finish what her team had started. The next morning, she served breakfast with the same quiet efficiency. Mason watched her more carefully now. Charlotte asked pointed questions about her background. Ethan made comments that felt less like jokes and more like tests. They were getting suspicious. Good. Let them wonder. Let them ask questions. She'd maintained her cover for 5 years. She could maintain it a little longer. During her lunch break, Logan Pierce approached her. "Ms. Carter, can I speak with you for a moment?" Raven's instincts immediately went on alert, but her expression remained neutral. "Of course, Sergeant." They walked to a quiet corner of the compound. Logan looked uncomfortable, like he was about to ask a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm sorry. Your background, your movements, the way you handle yourself, nothing adds up. You're not what you appear to be." Raven considered lying, considered deflecting, but something about Logan reminded her of her team, that same quiet competence, that same dedication. "I'm exactly what I appear to be," she said carefully. "A woman trying to live a quiet life." "After what?" "After things I'd rather not discuss." Logan nodded slowly. "Understood, but if there's something happening here, something that puts soldiers at risk, I need to know." "There isn't." "You sure about that? Because Admiral Fletcher doesn't show up at training facilities for no reason, and civilians don't get protective surveillance unless there's a threat." He'd noticed the watchers, of course he had. "Sergeant Pierce, I appreciate your concern, but I promise you I'm not a threat to anyone here." "That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about threats to you." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. "I can handle myself." "I believe you, that's what worries me." They stood in silence for a moment. "If you need anything," Logan said finally, "backup advice, someone to watch your 6, I'm available." "Thank you, but I'm fine." "Are you?" That question hung in the air between them. No, she wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine in 5 years, might never be fine again. But that wasn't his problem. "I appreciate your concern, Sergeant, really, but I'm okay." Logan didn't look convinced, but he nodded, respected her boundaries. As he walked away, Raven realized something. She'd spent 5 years in isolation, 5 years keeping everyone at arm's length, 5 years building walls so high nobody could see over them. But those walls were starting to crack. Fletcher knew who she was. Logan suspected. Mason and his team were getting suspicious. The cover was breaking down. And soon, very soon, everyone was going to learn the truth about the quiet cafeteria worker who served eggs and never spoke. They were going to learn about Death Angel. And once they knew, everything would change. When does a secret become too heavy to carry alone? The breaking point came 3 days later. Raven had been working the intelligence analysis at night, cross-referencing data, building profiles, identifying patterns in the network's operations. She was good at this, better than she'd remembered. The analytical mind that had made her an effective operator hadn't dulled during her years of exile. If anything, distance had sharpened it. She'd identified 5 high-value targets. 3 were American contractors. 2 were foreign intelligence officers. All of them were complicit in her team's deaths. All of them were still operating with impunity. Fletcher was pleased. The case was building. They had evidence, testimony, financial records, enough to bring prosecutions if they played it right. But prosecutions took time, legal processes, bureaucracy. And the network had realized someone was investigating them. The threat assessment changed overnight. Fletcher called her at 0200. They know. The network is aware someone's analyzing their operations. They're taking defensive measures. How do they know? We're not sure. Could be a leak. Could be they noticed unusual activity in their financial systems. Either way, threat level just escalated. How escalated? Active measures escalated. They're sending assets to identify and eliminate the threat. Assets, you mean killers? Yes. Raven looked out her window at the black sedan parked across the street. Her protective detail. 2 operators doing 12-hour shifts. How good is my security? The best I can provide, but these people are professionals. If they're determined enough, they'll find a way. So what are you suggesting? Move to a safe house. Let us protect you properly. No. Raven, this isn't negotiable. Your life is in danger. My life has been in danger since Kandahar. I'm still here. Because you've been hiding. That changes the moment they identify you. Then I'll handle it. Like you handled Vanguard Night, because that worked out so well for your team. The words hit like a physical blow. Silence stretched between them. That was below the belt, Fletcher said finally. I'm sorry. You should be. But I'm not wrong. You can't do this alone. I've been alone for 5 years. And look what it's cost you. Raven ended the call, sat in darkness, tried to control the rage building in her chest. Fletcher was trying to protect her. She understood that. But his methods were the same ones that had gotten her team killed. Trust the system. Follow protocol. Believe that the chain of command would keep you safe. She'd learned better. The next morning she went to work as usual. Same routine, same clothes, same quiet efficiency. But something had changed in the facility's atmosphere. Soldiers moved differently, more alert, more tense. Word had spread that something was happening. Nobody knew what exactly, but the compound was on heightened security. Random ID checks, increased patrols, restricted access to certain areas. Mason noticed her watching. You know what's going on? Raven shook her head. No, sir. Seems like overkill for a training facility. Makes me think something bigger is happening. Charlotte joined him at the serving line. I heard they're tracking a potential security threat. Foreign intelligence trying to infiltrate the base. They think there's a spy here, Ethan asked. Possibly, or they're protecting someone. Charlotte's eyes found Raven. Someone important. The implication hung in the air. Raven served their food without comment, but she felt the weight of their scrutiny, felt the questions building. During lunch rush, Logan pulled her aside. "The Admiral wants to see you." Her blood went cold. "What?" "Admiral Fletcher. He's requesting a meeting with all civilian personnel. Security briefing. You're on the list." This was it. Fletcher was bringing her in, making it official. When? 1500 hours. Conference room 3. She had 2 hours to decide how to handle this. At 14:45, she entered the conference room. It was already filling with civilian staff. Kitchen workers, maintenance crew, administrative assistants, people who kept the facility running while soldiers trained. People who had no idea that one of their colleagues was a Tier 1 operator responsible for 17 confirmed kills. Fletcher entered at exactly 1500 hours. Colonel Walsh accompanied him. "Thank you all for coming," Fletcher began. "I'll keep this brief. We've received intelligence indicating potential security threats to this facility. We're implementing enhanced protocols to ensure everyone's safety." He outlined new procedures, badge checks, escort requirements, restricted areas. Standard security theater. But his eyes found Raven in the crowd, held her gaze for just a moment. Message received. This wasn't about facility security. This was about her. After the briefing, as people filed out, Fletcher approached her. "A word, Ms. Carter." She followed him to a smaller office. Walsh joined them. "Colonel Walsh has been read into your situation," Fletcher said once the door closed. "He knows who you are." Walsh studied her with new eyes, reassessing, recalculating. "Death Angel," he said quietly. "I've read your file, impressive record." "Thank you, sir." "Why are you working in my mess hall?" "Because I needed a job and you were hearing." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Fletcher stepped in. "The situation has evolved. The network knows someone's investigating them. They're taking action. We believe they may send assets to this facility." "To kill me?" "To identify and eliminate the threat, yes." Walsh crossed his arms. "I don't like having targets on my base." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because this puts my soldiers at risk. If professional killers show up here looking for you, innocent people could get caught in the crossfire." He wasn't wrong. "I can leave," Raven offered. "Resign, disappear." "They'll find you," Fletcher said. "These people are good at finding people." "So am I." "You're one person. They're a network." "I've beaten worse odds." Walsh studied her. "You're not worried." "I'm always worried. I just don't show it." Something shifted in his expression. "Respect, maybe." "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Permission to defend myself if necessary." "You're a civilian. You can't carry weapons on base." "Then change that." "I can't authorize a civilian to be armed without proper justification." Fletcher pulled out a document. "This authorizes her as a contracted security consultant, gives her the same permissions as base security personnel." Walsh read it, signed it. Just like that, Raven Carter was officially armed. "Don't make me regret this," Walsh said. "I won't, sir." That evening, Raven received a weapons issue, standard sidearm, shoulder holster. The weight was familiar, comforting in a way she'd tried to forget. She holstered it under her jacket, barely visible, just another layer of protection between her and the world. The surveillance team received new orders, close protection. If she went somewhere, they went too. If threats materialized, they engaged. She was an asset now, not just a target. The shift should have felt reassuring. It didn't. Because she knew something Fletcher and Walsh didn't understand. The network wouldn't send obvious threats, wouldn't use methods that security could detect. They were professionals. They'd blend in, look normal, strike when nobody expected. Just like they'd done to her team. At 2200 hours, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number." "They're here." She moved to the window, looked out. The surveillance sedan was gone. In its place, nothing. Empty street, dark shadows. Too quiet. She called the security team. No answer. Called Fletcher. Something's wrong. My protection detail is offline. What? They're gone. No response to calls. Stay inside. Lock your door. I'm sending backup. But backup would take time. And time was something she might not have. Raven moved through her apartment with tactical precision. Lights off, sidearm in hand, back against the wall. Outside she heard footsteps, soft, professional. Someone was coming. She considered her options: barricade and wait for backup, engage and risk exposure, run and abandon her cover completely. Then she thought about her team, about Rodriguez and Kim and Hernandez and all the others who died because someone had made decisions that prioritized politics over people. She thought about 8 years of hiding, 8 years of serving eggs, 8 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was done hiding. The door handle moved, testing, someone checking if it was locked. It was. A pause, then the sound of tools. Lock picks maybe, professional entry techniques. 30 seconds and they'd be inside. Raven positioned herself in the corner. Perfect angle, clear sightline to the door, good cover. Death Angel stance. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward slowly. 2 figures entered, dark clothes, suppressed weapons, night vision goggles. Professional killers doing what they did best. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed their target was a cafeteria worker. She wasn't. Raven moved. 2 shots, center mass, both targets down before they registered movement. Textbook engagement. She cleared the doorway, checked the hallway, 2 more targets staging at the stairs. They heard the shots, responded with trained efficiency. But Raven was faster. 4 shots, 4 kills. 6 years since she'd been operational. Muscle memory didn't forget. She dragged the bodies inside, closed the door, called Fletcher. 4 hostiles neutralized, apartment compromised. I need cleanup and extraction. Jesus Christ, Raven. They came for me. I defended myself. Are you injured? No. Stay there, help is coming. She checked the bodies, professional gear, no identification, weapons were clean, untraceable. These weren't amateurs. 10 minutes later, Fletcher arrived with a full security team. They secured the scene, documented everything, removed the bodies with clinical efficiency. Walsh was with him, looked at the scene, looked at Raven. 4 targets, 4 kills, 6 years retired. Muscle memory, Raven said. That's not muscle memory, that's mastery. Fletcher pulled her aside. We need to get you somewhere safe, now. I'm not running. They'll send more. Let them. Raven, please, this isn't about pride, this is about survival. No, this is about finishing what my team started. She looked at him with eyes that hadn't blinked since the engagement. I'm done hiding, done being invisible. If they want Death Angel, they can have her, but they better bring everything they've got. You can't fight a network alone. Watch me. Something in Fletcher's expression changed. Recognition. The woman he'd recruited years ago was back. The angel had returned from exile. And heaven help anyone who got in her way. What happens when an angel remembers how to fight? The next morning, Raven Carter walked into the NATO facility, mess hall like she always did. Except everything was different. She wasn't wearing her usual blue t-shirt and plain clothes. She wore tactical pants, boots, a jacket that concealed her sidearm but didn't hide the fact that she was armed. She didn't keep her eyes down, didn't shuffle quietly to her station. She walked with purpose, head up, shoulders back. The posture of someone who'd stopped pretending. The mess hall went quiet as she passed. Soldiers stared, whispered. 300 people trying to reconcile the quiet cafeteria worker with the woman who now moved like a predator through their space. Mason Drake stood from his table. Charlotte and Ethan followed. "What's going on?" Mason asked, not mocking, not joking, genuinely confused. Raven stopped, met his eyes directly for the first time since he'd mocked her weeks ago. "My name isn't what you think it is," she said quietly. "My job isn't what you think it is, and who I am is something you wouldn't believe even if I told you." Before Mason could respond, Fletcher entered the mess hall with Colonel Walsh. "Attention," Walsh ordered. The room snapped to silence. Walsh moved to the front. Fletcher stood beside him. "Some of you have noticed increased security measures," Walsh began. "Some of you have questions about personnel changes. I'm here to provide clarity." He gestured to Raven. "This is Captain Raven Kine, United States Navy, Tier 1 operator, retired. For the past 5 years, she's been operating under civilian cover as a security measure following a classified incident that resulted in the deaths of her entire team." The room erupted in whispers. Walsh raised his hand for silence. "Yesterday evening, hostile assets attempted to eliminate Captain Kine in her home. She neutralized 4 targets without sustaining injury. This attack confirms intelligence we've been tracking regarding a criminal network operating within military and defense contractor circles." He paused, let that sink in. "Captain Kine has been conducting analysis to identify members of this network. Her work has been instrumental in building cases against individuals responsible for the deaths of American soldiers. She will now be operating in an official capacity as a consultant to this command." Mason looked like he'd been punched. Charlotte's expression was pure shock. Ethan just stared. Logan Pierce from his table was smiling. He'd known, suspected, and now he was vindicated. Walsh continued, "All personnel are to afford Captain Kine appropriate respect and cooperation. Her security classification exceeds everyone in this room except Admiral Fletcher and myself. Questions about her past operations are not authorized. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," the room responded in unison. Walsh dismissed them. Soldiers returned to their meals, but the energy had completely changed. Raven Carter, the quiet cafeteria worker they'd ignored or mocked, was actually a decorated combat veteran, a Tier 1 operator, someone who'd killed 4 professional assassins in her apartment. Someone who'd earned the kind of respect they gave their most elite warriors. Mason approached her slowly. "Captain, we didn't know." Raven's expression was neutral. "That was the point. The things we said, the way we treated you, I'm sorry." "Are you apologizing because you're sorry, or because you found out who I am?" The question hung between them. Mason had the decency to look ashamed. "Both, if I'm honest." "At least you're honest." She turned to leave. "Wait, can I ask why? Why work in a mess hall? Why let us treat you that way?" Raven paused, considered her answer. "Because I wanted to be someone else. Someone who didn't carry the weight of 8 deaths. Someone who could live a normal life. And for 5 years I almost convinced myself it was possible." "What changed?" "They found me, and I realized that some debts can't be paid by hiding. They have to be paid by finishing what was started." She walked to Fletcher's temporary office. Inside, a secure briefing was already in progress. "We've identified 3 high-value targets based on your analysis," Fletcher explained, displaying photos on the screen. "James Rutherford, defense contractor, sold weapons to insurgent groups. Marcus Chen, intelligence broker, facilitated communication between the network and hostile services. And Colonel Richard Voss, Army procurement officer, authorized shipments that never reached their intended destinations." Raven studied the faces, memorized them. "Where are they?" "Rutherford is in Dubai. Chen is in Singapore. Voss is stateside, Washington, D.C. And the plan? Legal prosecution. We've built cases against all three. Federal prosecutors are ready to move. That takes years, appeals, lawyers, they might never see justice. It's the right way. Raven looked at Fletcher. The right way got my team killed. Sometimes right isn't fast enough. You're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. These people have been operating with impunity for years. Legal processes gave them time to hide evidence, eliminate witnesses, continue profiting from chaos. How many more soldiers will die while lawyers argue procedure? Fletcher's expression hardened. You're a consultant, not an operator. Your job is analysis, not action. Then you shouldn't have given me a weapon. They stared at each other. Old commander and former operator. Authority versus autonomy. Walsh cleared his throat. What if there was another way, legal but faster? Both of them turned. Military tribunal, Walsh explained. These individuals operated against military personnel, caused deaths of American soldiers. Under certain circumstances, we can bring them before military justice rather than civilian courts. Jurisdiction issues, Fletcher said. They're civilians. Not if we can prove they were operating as enemy combatants, providing material support to hostile forces. The Patriot Act gives us latitude. It was a stretch, but it was possible. How long? Raven asked. Months instead of years. And once we have them in custody, interrogation protocols are different. We can extract information about the larger network faster. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Over the next week, the operation moved forward. Arrest warrants were issued. International cooperation was secured. Assets were deployed. Rutherford was arrested in Dubai. Chen was taken into custody in Singapore. Voss was picked up outside his Pentagon office. All three were transported to military detention facilities. All three refused to talk. That's when Fletcher called Raven into his office. Voss wants to speak with you, specifically, won't talk to anyone else. Why me? He says he has information about what happened to your team. Says he'll only share it with the person who survived. It was a manipulation, a power play, Voss trying to control the narrative even from detention. But Raven couldn't ignore it. She entered the interrogation room alone. Voss sat in standard restraints, 50s, silver hair, the kind of face that looked trustworthy, which was probably how he'd gotten away with treason for so long. Captain Kine, he said, or should I call you Death Angel? Call me whatever you want. I'm here for information, not pleasantries. Direct, I respect that. He leaned back in his chair as much as the restraints allowed. You want to know what happened to your team? I know what happened. You helped set them up. I facilitated logistics, but I wasn't the architect. You're going after the wrong people. Tell me who the right people are. Why would I do that? Because you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison regardless. The only question is how that life looks. Cooperation gets you better conditions. Silence gets you isolation. Voss smiled. You think prison scares me. I have resources, connections. I'll be comfortable regardless. Then why did you ask to see me? Curiosity. Wanted to meet the legend. Death Angel. 17 kills in one engagement. Fought her way out of a kill box designed by the best tactical minds in the business. Is there a point to this? The point is you're impressive. Wasted in cafeterias and analysis work. You should be operational. I was operational. It got my team killed. No, bad intelligence got your team killed. The difference matters. Raven stood. This conversation is over. The architect, Voss said quickly. The person who planned your team's ambush, former special forces, now private sector, goes by the name Talon. That's all I'll give you without a deal. She paused at the door. Deals require leverage. What do you have? Names, accounts, operational details for the entire network, everything you need to dismantle it completely. In exchange for what? Witness protection, new identity, comfortable relocation. You want a reward for betraying your co-conspirators after betraying your country. I want survival. Prison is dangerous for people who know too much. Raven considered, hated herself for considering, but if Voss could give them the entire network. I'll present your offer to Admiral Fletcher, he decides. Not good enough. I deal with you or no one. I'm not authorized to make those decisions. Then get authorized, because in 72 hours my lawyers will have me transferred to civilian custody, and once that happens, you lose your only window for fast justice. Fletcher and Walsh reviewed Voss's offer. It's manipulation, Fletcher said. He's playing us. But if he's telling the truth, Walsh countered, we could end this entire operation, prevent future attacks, at the cost of letting a traitor walk free. Not free, protected, there's a difference. They both looked at Raven. Your call, Fletcher said. Your team, your mission. Raven thought about Rodriguez, Kim, Hernandez, Jackson, Martinez, Owens, Chen, Davis. 8 names, 8 faces, 8 voices asking for justice. Would they want revenge or results? Would they want Voss punished or the network destroyed? Make the deal, she said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. He gives us everything. Every name, every account, every operation. Complete cooperation. And if we find out he's holding back anything, the deal is void and he goes to maximum security for life. Agreed, what else? I want operational authority to act on the intelligence he provides. No more analysis. No more sitting on the sidelines. I want to finish this personally. Fletcher hesitated. That's a big ask. It's my only ask. Otherwise, Voss can rot and you can spend years building cases while more soldiers die. The silence stretched. Finally, Walsh spoke. I'll authorize it, temporary operational status, limited duration, specific mission parameters. Fletcher nodded reluctantly. Agreed, but Raven, this isn't about revenge. This is about justice. Sometimes they're the same thing. They made the deal. Voss cooperated, provided names, documents, financial records, everything. The network was larger than they'd imagined, deeper, more connected. But it was also vulnerable now. Because Death Angel was hunting. Over the next month, Raven operated with a small team of trusted assets. They moved systematically through the network. Arrests, asset seizures, disruption operations. Some targets came quietly, others resisted. The ones who resisted learned why they called her Death Angel. Mason, Charlotte, and Ethan requested to be part of her team. To their surprise, she accepted. Why us? Mason asked, after how we treated you. Because you're good at what you do, and because everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday. Logan Pierce became her second in command. His experience and judgment were invaluable. Corporal Connor Reed provided medical support. Private Lily Morgan, the young soldier who'd recorded the mess hall incident, handled communications. A team, not her old team, but a team nonetheless. They found Talon in an off-grid compound in South America, former Special Forces, tactical genius, the man who designed the killbox that killed her team. The engagement was brief, precise. Talon fought well, but not well enough. When it was over, Raven stood over his body and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, just emptiness. Is it done? Fletcher asked when she returned. It's done. How do you feel? Tired. That's normal. Is it? Because I don't know what normal is anymore. Fletcher placed a hand on her shoulder. You did good work. Your team would be proud. My team is dead. But not forgotten. never forgotten. That night Raven returned to her apartment, the one she'd lived in for 5 years, the one where she'd been attacked, the one where she'd killed 4 people. She packed her things, not many, she'd never accumulated much. At the bottom of her closet was the old box, photos, unit patches, challenge coins. She looked at her team's faces one last time. "I finished it," she whispered. "Not the way I wanted, not the way you deserved, but I finished it." She closed the box, sealed it. Some things needed to stay buried. The next morning, she submitted her resignation, both to the NATO facility and to Fletcher's operation. "Where will you go?" Fletcher asked. "I don't know, somewhere quiet." "You've earned that." "Have I?" "Yes, more than anyone I know." She left the facility without fanfare. No goodbye speeches, no medals, just a quiet exit. In the parking lot, Logan was waiting. "Thought you might need a ride," he said. "I have a car." "I know, but maybe you shouldn't drive alone." She smiled, first real smile in months. "Okay." They drove in silence for a while. Then Logan spoke. "What you did, taking down that network, saving lives, that matters." "Does it?" "Yes, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." "How do you know?" "Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same emptiness. But eventually you realize that the work mattered even if the cost was high." Raven looked out the window at the passing landscape. "My team died for nothing. A weapons cache, corporate profits, meaningless." "No, they died protecting each other. That's never meaningless." She wanted to believe that, tried to, maybe someday she would. They drove to a small coastal town she'd never been to. Logan helped her find an apartment, studio, ocean view, quiet. "You going to be okay?" he asked. "Eventually." "Need anything?" "No, but thank you for everything." He nodded, understood. After he left, Raven stood on the small balcony and watched the ocean, waves rolling in, endless, relentless. Like missions, like memories. Her phone buzzed. "Fletcher. Just checking in." "I'm fine." "Are you?" "No, but I will be. If you need anything." "I know, but Richard, I meant what I said. I'm done, really done." "I understand." "Do you?" "Yes, some angels need to rest. You've earned your peace." "Thank you." She ended the call, looked at the phone, at all the messages and calls and connections to a life she was leaving behind. Then she turned it off, set it on the table, and walked back to the balcony to watch the sunset. Because some missions end not with explosions or medals or closure. They end with silence, with distance, with the slow, difficult work of learning to be human again. Raven Carter had been Death Angel, Tier 1 operator, killer of 17 in one night and countless others over the years. But maybe, in this quiet place with ocean sounds and no one watching, she could be something else. Someone who'd served, who'd sacrificed, who'd carried weight no one should carry. Someone who'd earned the right to put it down. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of fire and blood and war. But also of endings. And endings, she was learning, were sometimes beginnings in disguise. She whispered to the wind, to the ocean, to the ghosts that would always follow her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And sometimes angels don't return to heaven, they just learn to live with gravity. The ocean answered with waves. Endless. Relentless. Forgiving.